And now some more unanswered questions from the Arrow report, Dr. Knuth. It seemed to be littered with breadcrumbs about strange materials. And it brought up this one notion of strange materials in the private sector. It said the organization claimed that the material they had in their possession had the potential to act as a terahertz frequency waveguide and therefore could exhibit anti-gravity and mass reduction properties under the appropriate conditions. Ultimately, however, the new report concluded Arrow and a leading science laboratory said that the material is a metallic alloy, terrestrial in nature, and possibly of U.S. Air Force origin based on its materials characterization. So again, we've got strange materials in the private sector, but Arrow says, well, they might be the Air Force. We're not for sure, but it's definitely terrestrial and nothing anomalous. And Dr. Knuth, this brings up an interesting dilemma. One thing I've always heard is that we essentially have the same chemicals and elements throughout the entire universe. So if we actually did have something extraterrestrial in our possession, how would we know that it was extraterrestrial?
And that is another difficult problem. If you had material from a crash, how would you identify that it didn't come from Earth? Everything in the universe is made up of all the same elements and all the same isotopes. Now, one way to tell that something is different, at least, would be to look at the isotope ratios. So a certain type of chemical is a chemical basically because chemistry acts using the electrons in the electron shell around the atoms. And the number of electrons equals the number of protons in the nucleus. But you can have extra neutrons, which don't have an electric charge, and that changes the mass of the atoms. So those are different isotopes. Different isotopes have different numbers of neutrons. So we know that certain chemicals on Earth, certain elements on Earth can have different isotopes. And we know on Earth naturally which isotopes occur with which proportions. So if you find a material that's been made where the isotope proportions don't match what you would expect to happen naturally on Earth, then you know that either somebody tampered with the isotopes in creating that object, or it perhaps came from somewhere else, did not come from Earth. You can't conclude, definitively that it didn't come from Earth, but you can at least conclude that it's not naturally occurring on Earth or had been somehow manipulated. So I don't know what the isotope, I don't know about any of the isotope studies for that particular material. That material was a layered piece of metal that consisted of, it was bismuth and magnesium, if I remember right. So they were nano layers of bismuth and magnesium, which is interesting because one of them is diamagnetic and the other is paramagnetic. So they have different magnetic properties. And that has been, those properties have been used in creating new types of materials that we use for, that we're now experimenting with. They're called metamaterials, and they have special properties. And this particular piece of metal that had been tested acted like a terahertz waveguide. So terahertz is a very high frequency of radiation. So it's above radio. It has a higher frequency than radio waves, higher frequency than microwaves, but it's less than infrared light. So it sits in this region between microwaves and infrared light. And in fact, the scanners at airports where you got to put your hands up, those are terahertz devices. Now, we don't have much capability to work with terahertz electromagnetic waves in the terahertz range. That's hard to do. And we're just learning how to do that. And so for this to be a terahertz waveguide is kind of interesting, but it's hard to know what it is. And for Arrow to be claiming that this is consistent with materials that have been made by the Air Force or that. Well, let's see the evidence. I would, I'm skeptical, and I'm skeptical of everybody. Anybody who comes to me that says they saw an alien spacecraft, I'm skeptical. But I'm also skeptical of government reports that claim things that don't provide evidence. So let's see the evidence that the Air Force is making things like this. I would like to see the evidence right through the claim. So yeah, they could. Yeah, easy to blow it off saying, "Oh yeah, we make these," and then we're supposed to just believe you. Look, this is the same organization that told us that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons of mass destruction, and we're supposed to just believe them. I'm skeptical and distrustful at this point. So let's see some honesty and openness, and maybe we can have a trusting relationship again.